Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Sergeant First Class Will Rainier. I'm the Public Affairs NCO to Sergeant Major of the Army Grinston. This morning, I'll be moderating a discussion between Sergeant Major of the Army Michael Grinston, Sergeant Major Mark Clark, the Army G1 Sergeant Major, and Command Sergeant Major Anthony McAdoo. Gentlemen, if you could join us on screen by turning on your cameras. Thank you so much. Today's topics will focus on the NCO evaluation boards and the subsequent order of merit lists they produce. We'll talk about how those lists are used for PME scheduling and an update on the issues we identified last fall that resulted in issuing temporary promotions this year. SMAs, Sergeants Major. We posted this topic on social media last week and on Reddit, and we got a lot of great questions. But before we begin the discussion, I wanted to give you, SMA, an opportunity for any opening comments.
Thank you, Sir Rainier, and good morning, and thank you for joining us. And I also want to thank Sergeant Major Clark and Sergeant Major McAdoo for doing this. And it's a very important topic for our NCOs, so thank you for joining us. Before we start, though, I want to give a short update on our situation in Europe. You know, currently we have U.S. forces that are not fighting in Ukraine, but we do have soldiers that are there to reinforce and help our NATO allies and partners in the region. There have been about 43,000 soldiers in Europe right now, 25,000 permanently assigned there, 6,000 as part of rotational forces, and 12,000 who have deployed or are deploying. And then last week, the chief and I had a chance to visit some of those soldiers in Poland, and I couldn't be more proud of how they stepped up at a moment's notice when their country called. The 82nd Airborne Division actually is on their fourth no-notice deployment in the last 2 years. The 1st Infantry Brigade Combat Team has been there, and they're doing an outstanding job. And then the 1st Brigade, 3rd ID, just deployed, and we're really proud of those soldiers out of the 3rd Infantry Division. I got a chance to see them in Grafenwehr last week. We don't know exactly when they're coming home, so we ask for all of you to keep the soldiers and their families in your thoughts and your prayers. And finally, we have a lot of soldiers that with families that may have families in Ukraine, so they haven't heard from in weeks. So I can't imagine how difficult that must be for those soldiers that have family members, and we always keep them in our prayers too. I want everyone to know that we're thinking about our soldiers, no matter where they're at in the world, especially those that have deployed to reassure and assure our NATO allies in the last 3 weeks. With all that going on, it's important that we continue to promote the most talented soldiers, especially those deployed, and that's why we're doing this today. So again, I'm proud of all those soldiers and what they've done for those that have deployed over, and I look forward to our discussions on this topic on how we manage the talent and get those promoted that need to be promoted.
All right. Thank you so much for taking that time to talk today. I want to start with just a brief overview of the NCO evaluation boards, kind of just understanding how it works and what is that, how do we get to that end product of the order of merit list? Sergeant Major McAdoo and Sergeant Major Clark.
Hey, absolutely. First and foremost, SMA, thank you for having us on here. Definitely appreciate the opportunity to be able to help educate the field on the new policies. And then, of course, having Sergeant Major McAdoo here to be able to talk through the processes of how they executed on the HRC end. Sergeant Rainier, if not already, just if you can post the one slide as an illustration so that everyone can kind of follow along what I'm going to explain to them. So as many of you are aware, the NCO evaluation boards, we do 4 a year: the Staff Sergeant, Sergeant First Class, Master Sergeant, and the Sergeant Major Evaluation Board. Each one of those boards are made up of panels, and each one has a different number of panels based on the size of the population board files that the board members have to actually vote. So for example, the Sergeant Major Evaluation Board has 4 panels, the Master Sergeant Evaluation Board has 5 panels, and then the Staff Sergeant and the Sergeant First Class Evaluation Board has 12 panels. On the slide that you see before you is an example of how the board members vote their records. Each board member would do a hard vote of each record from a 1 through a 6+. A 6+ being the highest that an individual could have for a board score. So an example for a board panel that has 5 members, if a soldier has a board score of 30 plus 5, that means that all 5 board members gave them a 6+, which is the highest score that an individual can have. And based on that board score, your OML number is generated by the highest to the lowest board score. So for example, if a board gave each soldier a score of a 1, that soldier would have a board score of 5, and that individual soldier would then be found not fully qualified for retention. The goal, as they go through and vote each record, is to identify most qualified, fully qualified, and soldiers who are not fully qualified for either promotion or retention. In order to be fully qualified, on average, the board members have to give a soldier a score of 3 or higher, which means you need a minimum of 15 minus 5 in order to be fully qualified. Anything lower than 15 minus 5, the soldier will either be not fully qualified for promotion or not fully qualified for retention. Now, this is very similar to the promotion process or the promotion board process that we had in the past. The difference now is we no longer just use that OML to identify who we're going to promote, but we now use it to inform other human resources decisions such as assignments, as well as school training, and also who to retain and who to possibly separate from the Army as a whole.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate, because obviously this OML is very important because it informs a lot of other things that Sergeant Major Clark was talking about. And one of the big things I know we'll talk about today is talk about the PME. I just want to kind of clarify those results of whichever board it comes out, some of the dates that are released with it. So you have a release date of the board, and really for the field, for you all, that really doesn't have any impact on you, as there's really no action or thing that happens that is executable. It's just to show the field and show you where it is that you stand in the OML, as we stated before, whether it's most qualified or fully qualified. Now, the most important date that you will see at the release of every evaluation board is the effective date. And the effective date is normally probably about 3 months past the after the date that it is released. Now, to you, that is the most important date for you, because that effective date is the date that list you can be promoted from and that you can go to school from. There's been a lot of confusion in the field here recently when we, released the new board for the next fiscal year with still comparing the previous year to the current year. So please, anytime that you're looking at it, see exactly which fiscal year the board is, and understand that the OML number that is associated with that fiscal year board is effective, the effective date of that message. So I just want to clarify some of the dates that come out when you see the release of those evaluation boards.
Yeah, thank you. I think overall, and we've said this numerous times, the OML is not a guarantee for promotion. It's just how we use this order merit list and what do we use it for. And Sergeant Major Clark did a great explanation on how we use that. But it's important to understand that it's, there's no guarantees, and it's what we, there's no guarantees for this promotion because we promote off of requirements now based off the most talented at the top. So if, like you said, if you're a 30 and if that's only 5 board members, you get 30 and then plus 5, you're going to be the number 1 candidate to get promoted for that skill set and that job if we have those requirements. If there's no requirements, then there would be no promotions. And normally, there's going to be promotions, but it's just a little different than it was in the past. So I think that was a very good explanation.
And if I may just add one more point to add on to what you're saying. One thing that we did change from a promotion board to the evaluation board is in the event that there is a tie. Before, we would only have to break a tie at the cut line to determine who would be promoted. But now that we want a clean OML to give us the ability to surge in promotions as additional requirements present themselves, we need a clean OML from top to bottom. So we have to break all ties within that board. So instead of having the board members go back to revote each board, each tie, the ties will then be broken by time and service. In the event that they have the same time and service, we'll then go to, they'll be broken by date of rank, time and service, and then date of birth in the event that they have a tie in those subsequent areas.
Okay, thank you.
Great. So we'll go to our first question from Reddit, and kind of a basic question, but and this is a direct quote, so don't get mad at me. I know it's online, but I see the same basic question all the time. When will XYZ OML be published? This shows me two things. One, my peers are lazy, and two, it's not widely broadcasted from the powers that be. Again, these are the words of our soldiers, not mine. So can we just briefly go over that annual cycle of when people should expect the board file to open, close, results published, etc.?
Okay, Rainier's doing push-ups. No, it's okay.
No worries, SMA. That's actually a great question. One of the things that we tried to do, because we took some predictability away from soldiers, is to give them some predictability with the board process as a whole. So everyone is familiar with the 4 evaluation boards. We pretty much have them the same time every year. So, we'll do the Staff Sergeant Evaluation Board around February every year, the Master Sergeant Evaluation Board in May, Sergeant Major Evaluation Board in August, and then, of course, the Sergeant First Class Evaluation Board November timeframe. With that, we also wanted to give you kind of permanent release dates. Obviously, unless something significant takes place, these are the dates that you can always expect to have these OMLs and fully qualified lists released. So for the Sergeant First Class Evaluation Board that takes place in November, we plan to release that on January 20th of every year. So that is your date on the wall every year for the Sergeant First Class Evaluation Board. For the Master Sergeant Evaluation Board, we plan to release that on July 20th of every year. The Sergeant Major Evaluation Board, we released on September 20th because we have to get that out early enough in order to notify those who are going to go to the Sergeant Major Assessment Program. And then for the Sergeant Major Academy students, we typically notify them on or about 1 December every year of who's going to go to the Sergeant Major Academy. And then lastly, for the Sergeant Major Academy graduates who have not received their OML yet because they're waiting for graduation, those are typically released or will be released on June 20th of every year. So we try to use the 20th of the month for each board as the mark on the wall when those fully qualified, not fully qualified, and OMLs will be released.
Yeah, I think the one thing that we haven't completely clarified yet is, to actually publish the OML to the broader group of soldiers. That we're working on a plan to do that. So you will get your OML, but does everybody else know everybody else's OML? That we don't have that. We're working on a plan on how or if we're going to share that. I've asked Sergeant Major Clark and Sergeant Major McAdoo. We've had a couple conversations on this. We're working on it for those leaders that may be listening in. So our goal is to, at some point, publish the OML, but we have to educate, and everybody has to understand that it's no guarantee for promotion and that we use the OML for other things. So the goal is in the next year that we actually would, at some level, get the OMLs out to the leaders. But I just caution everybody is that just because you're on the OML doesn't mean you're guaranteed you get promoted. So we got to be very cautious on how we use that because it's used for other things. So, but there is an ultimate goal of mine is to actually get that out to leaders in the field so they can at least see the OML and not have to ask everybody in their unit on what's their OML number.
So at the end of this evaluation board, we talked about the OML number and all the different purposes that it has, but can we discuss kind of how soldiers can be more proactive instead of reactive? A common concern that I saw across social media was that when the AERs come out, they're really general and really obvious. Have a higher PT score, do more college, go to schools, things like that. What are some other ways that soldiers really need to focus on improving their OML for the next year?
Okay, I'll dive on this one first and pass it off to Sergeant Major McAdoo. So the first thing, one, understanding what board members have in front of them when they're actually voting your records and what influences how they vote their record. So one, they have the board MOI from the Army G1, which kind of outlines the basic soldier needs that we want them to look for that are in line with the leadership requirement model. So as you look at the attributes and the competencies of those soldiers, you're voting against that rubric. But then they also have DAPAM 600-25, which is completed by the proponent of each MOS and tells the board members kind of what jobs and challenges in schools or PT scores or civilian education that are needed in that specific MOS to give them the necessary development to be successful at the next higher grade. And so it's different for each MOS, and you have board members who are not of the same MOS that sit on that board panel who need the APAM 600-25 to truly understand what's considered a top tier talent in this MOS versus top tier talent in another MOS. So they use that plus their experience to kind of identify their voting philosophy, and that's how they apply that to their hard vote of a 1 through a 6+. So in reference to the common concerns of the AARs, what we are working once we get the Army System Board 2.0 online is voter feedback to the soldiers, where during the board process, board members can hit a drop-down menu and kind of identify areas that either positively influence their vote or negatively influence their vote. And that would be communicated directly to the soldier through the Army Career Tracker so that you can get some specific feedback from board members on kind of how your board file looked to them as a whole.
And which board do you predict we'll start to see that feedback available? Sergeant Major McAdoo, do you?
Yeah, not necessarily answering the question that you asked that way, but what you want to talk about what is it you can do. What's great about the boards that are coming up here, each CMF is obviously CMS specific. They all have different things that they need for their leader development model. What is great about the beginning of each one of these boards is the proponents brief those CMS brief the board. So we're talking about what it is that soldiers can do or leaders can do to prepare themselves. I would say stay in contact with the proponent. Your proponent can let you know exactly what it is that they're going to brief the board, that they're looking for when it comes to that next level. And then what we also implemented on this last board was an after action review with the actual proponent. So the proponent gives a brief to the board members prior to, letting them know what it is that 600-25 says and what is it looking for the next leaders. And at the end of the board, they come back and get feedback from the board members. Now, this last board was the first one that we did it, but we don't have the I don't have the metrics or the feedback from that yet to provide to the field, but we will as soon as we consolidate that.
Okay, Sergeant Major Clark, do you know when do we plan on implementing?
So ASBS 2.0, the Army Selection Board System, will come online after IPSA Release 3 is in place. So there's no hard date on the board yet, SMA. So it's pending, obviously, the successful rollout of IPSA. Once that's in place, then the team at HRC can begin to shift focus to integrate into ASBS 2.0.
Okay, and we're hopeful to get IPSA out this summer.
IPSA will be out this summer, SMA, September. The mark is on the wall.
Okay, good. Sergeant Major Clark said so. I do want to caveat one thing here is I know this is going to be really crazy for you. Leadership matters. So when you want to know why you didn't get promoted or not, you can always go to your battalion CSM, your first sergeants, and say, please take a look at my records. And I'll give the example. I had a really good first sergeant, and he didn't get promoted. I wanted to know why. I said, can you bring in your records? And probably within 3 minutes, I was like, yep, there it is right there. So he had 2 comments. He had two NCOs in 2 years that were exactly word for word the exact same. And, anybody that looks at that says, well, who would do that? And then why did the NCO allow this to happen? I mean, why didn't appeal it? I mean, there was all kinds of things that would leave a big mark in the question of the eyes of the board. So your leadership taking the time to talk to them and say, just look at my records. I still think that's the most valuable asset you have. They got promoted somehow. So hopefully they can give you some coaching specifically on your records that is tailored to you. And of course, we're going to get you all the online system, get the feedback. But I think the most valuable feedback is your leaders.
Great. This question is a little bit niche, and we may not have the exact data on hand, but I think it gets at a larger question. It says last year's Staff Sergeant Board and the subboard for CMFs 15 and 19 overrated their NCOs for most qualified. For example, CMF 15 only has 5.7% of all staff sergeants, but accounted for 26.9% of the most qualifieds. CMF 19 had 3.8% of staff sergeants, but was 12.5% of all most qualifieds. I know we may not have the exact data on hand to verify that, but the larger question here being, what measures do we have in place, or are we looking at anything to audit or ensure kind of fairness? And I hate that word fairness, but just to kind of make sure that everything across these boards is happening to bar.
Yeah, so based on how I understand how the question was asked, I think there may be a misconception on what most qualified actually means. I think we're mixing most qualified from a board as the same as most qualified for an evaluation. Obviously, there are limits to how many most qualifieds an individual or a rater or senior rater can have when we're talking about evaluations. However, when we're talking about most qualified for an evaluation board, we're talking about how an individual's board score or how a panel voted an individual's record. So meaning on that hard vote of 1 through 6 plus, they had an average score of 5.5 or higher. So that's based on an individual's performance and how those board members voted those records. Keeping in mind that the MOSs that you just named are all sitting on different panels. So there are different board members that are voting those records. So it's based on an individual performance in accordance to how they're performing with 600-25, the MOI, and obviously the experience of the sergeant majors who are actually voting that record. So there's not a set number across where, you know, each MOS should have so many MQs. That there's no standard to that. It is based on the individual performance of that soldier and how the board members voted in accordance with DAPAM 600-25.
Yeah, I think the most important piece there is that we'd have to clarify that question. Yeah, are you talking about, you know, your NCO or your board score? And I think Sergeant Major Clark clearly explained what happens in most qualified in your board score, which could be completely different than your NCOER. So, you know, if you're just looking at the percentage of NCOERs, you know, that there is no quota that says who gets the, you know, what MOS gets the most qualified in an organization. But I think we'd have to dig in deeper to see exactly what that question is. But I think that was well answered by Sergeant Clark.
Yeah, I'm glad that somebody thought glad you did it, because I was still trying to do math. You know, but like I said, really, just for the group as a whole, I know everyone's concerned about MQs and all that stuff here, but remember understanding with the OML, whether it's a promotion, whether it's going to school or whatever, it's where you rank at on the OML. It doesn't matter if it's MQ or whatever it is. If there's only one MQ or no MQs, we're still going down to OML when it comes to promotion, if you're otherwise fully qualified, and also for school training.
And if I can just add that, great point, Sergeant Major McAdoo. Just to kind of clarify misunderstanding of MQs as a whole. MQs are really kind of feedback to individual soldiers on how well their record was voted. It doesn't guarantee anything, as Sergeant Major McAdoo was saying. It doesn't guarantee promotion, it doesn't guarantee school, it doesn't guarantee a CSM position or a CSL or a key billet position. It's just feedback to you as a soldier to let you know that in accordance with 600-25, board members saw that your record is in line with kind of where you need to be. So that's feedback to you to kind of keep doing what you're doing, or maybe figure out how to get that 0.5 points so that you can get a 6. Obviously, the choice is yours on how you use that information, but there are no guaranteed promotions, assignments, or CSL that is associated with the most qualified or nominative positions as well.
Yeah, and what I would, you know, really close this out is a lot of people do this at all levels. This, I think, just talked about staff sergeants, but they cross-pollinate MOSs. And that's normally not how the Army works. You know, we promote to requirements normally in that field. At certain points, we stop doing that when you get the nominative level. It just says, you know, who's eligible, who's the most talented, you know, E9 we have. So, but, you know, the requirements for those that are going to get promoted as 11 Bravo are going to be different requirements for those that are going to get promoted as a 15. So, you know, comparing MOSs at the staff sergeant level normally is not helpful either.
All great conversation. And so we get the OML and it produces that's the promotion list, right? That's what everybody thinks, isn't it? It's not the promotion list. So if we could just
I thought we were pretty clear on that.
Very clear on that. So number one, we did discuss already the PME scheduling. Can we go over just a few of the other things that the OML is used for and kind of dispel some of those common questions that we keep hearing from the field?
Yes. So kind of going back to the opening question of before under the old promotion board concept, we only used the output of that OML to determine who would get promoted. But we've learned that there are a lot of other HR decisions that can be informed by the OML to really help us get after the talent management efforts under the Army People Strategy. So in addition to promotion, we also use the OML to identify school scheduling. HRC also uses it to talk through assignments. And then we also use it when we start talking about the not fully qualified in order to professionalize our NCO Corps on, who gets separated from the Army and who do we also retain. And as we keep doing these boards, we're gaining more data and looking at kind of what it's telling us about the performance of NCOs and kind of where our talent exists. And then we will be able to modify our policies to strengthen our talent management processes. But I'll kind of let Sergeant Major McAdoo talk a little bit more towards the scheduling and the assignments.
Yeah, and Sergeant Major McAdoo, could you talk about, when one OML is ending, one is coming out, and how it refers to, PME specifically, because that's usually been a lot of confusion right there.
Yeah, I appreciate that estimation. Major Clark kind of explained a lot of things. I was going to explain, reference the assignments and stuff. But like I said, when talked earlier, reference the OML, reference the evaluation boards, the OMLs that come out of it. You got to make sure, as I stated before, that you are looking at that physical year. We've had situations before. We had a huge situation where someone came and said, hey, we have 311 Zulus, and they got scheduled for PME out of sequence. The deal was they had sequence numbers from before the previous fiscal year and sequence numbers for the current fiscal year. So they were comparing the two, as we talked about comparing different MOS, so they were comparing two different OMLs. That's why I talked earlier, referenced the importance of the effective date of that evaluation board. So you're comparing yourself or you're comparing your soldiers or non-commissioned officers against someone else when it comes to scheduling for school. Ensure that you look at the exact year of the board, because there will always be approximately about a 3-month, I call it 3-month overlap from when the new board gets released to when the other board is still, when the previous board is still currently effective right there. So I know we'll probably talk about this a little later on too, but we're trying to make that easier on the field to see by posting that within the HRC website, showing which OML that we are scheduling forces to, and then what number that they have that we have scheduled to. So at the end of the day, just always look at the fiscal year board evaluation when you are comparing. Just like we say, compare like MOS to like MOSs, compare like evaluation boards with like evaluation boards.
Great. So one of the issues that we identified last late summer, early fall was that we had created essentially a backlog of PME as far as scheduling off the OML. Can we talk about any of the progress that's been made in reducing that backlog and where we are for just catching up to the OML as it stands?
I knew you guys waiting on me for this one. But going into the 10th promotion cost we got right now, was based off we had personnel who transitioned to this evaluation board that had not had a chance to go to school yet. Even though they may have had a great number with the transition to the merit base, they may not have had a chance to go yet. So obviously, talking with Army senior leaders, and the SMA approved us implementing the, as I call it, bridging strategy, the temporary strategy for a year. And the last brief that we provided to Army senior leadership, mainly the SMA, kind of shows that the bridging strategy of the temporary promotions is working for master sergeants and sergeant first classes, but sergeant first classes with a caveat, because as you all know, we have some MOSs that only have maybe one school a year. So we're looking at those specific MOSs and maybe come back with a course of action to maybe look at those on a continual basis. But as far as for the progress, based off of where we are right now, we're showing a probably about like a 10% decrease from month to month when we started temporary promotions from Master Sergeant. And we predict based off of the current analysis, if it's all based off of projections going forward. We predict probably around July timeframe, we'll be able to close that gap. As I stated earlier, for the Sergeant First classes, it's about the same. However, we will still have a few MOSs based off of, lack of schools for them to go to that may still may need to fall into a temporary promotion status. So just letting you know, it is working. It's working a little quicker than we thought it would for the Master Sergeant and the Sergeant First class.
Yeah. Bottom line is, I look at this every month. We do an in-depth brief on every MOS, every temporary promotion, who's been to school, who hasn't been to school, and why. So our ultimate goal is to get rid of the backlog by October this year. Now, do we get that, Joe? I don't know. We're not going to stop temporary promotions until we get rid of the backlog, so we don't want to disadvantage our soldiers. So, but bottom line is, every month we huddle together to see, are we on track or are we not, to make sure we get that backlog is down as low as we can.
One thing we are seeing from the field is a little request for just a little bit more transparency and predictability. One question from Reddit asks if it's possible to publish a report that lists what OML numbers have been to PME in a given month, or what OML numbers HRC anticipates will be scheduled in the upcoming quarter. Again, an effort to provide predictability for planning and help reduce the number of late deferments or no-shows and give advance warning. So not necessarily unmasking the OML, but just saying, here's the OMLs that have already been to school, and here's what we project for the future.
That can be again. Now, I really love this question, and today is the perfect venue to kind of talk about it, because we continue to talk about transparency, and everything we're doing here with HRC is to try to improve that transparency. But as with any initiative or new thing that comes out, if everyone doesn't understand what the initiative is, understand where it's at, then they can't use it to their advantage. I say all that to tell you that here within HRC, we are posting on a monthly basis. We started a few months back, how far down the OML that we have scheduled personnel for school. So you can actually anyone can go online to our website and search it. Well, I will admit, as you go to the website, sometimes it's a little hard to find. So we're looking internally to HRC now. How is it that we make it easy for a sergeant or a staff sergeant or sergeant first class or a master sergeant to go on to our website and just click a certain place, and maybe at that position or that point we have some hyperlinks to get them to where they want to go. But absolutely, the transparency is there. It is on the website. If you click here, then click here, then click here and here, you'll eventually get to it. But we are going to obviously work to try to make that a lot easier for the field to see.
Yeah, to the second part of that, Sergeant Major McAdoo, how do we, the second part was, can we project or see, what OML numbers will be at the next class? Here's who has gone to class, but how the second piece of that was, how do we see those that would be scheduled for the future?
Yes, SMA right now we're scheduled between 90 and 120 days out. 120 days out, and on the website it will show those that are scheduled out. Out the OML, how far it's scheduled out to.
Okay, so it's on the same website.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, good.
And we will look internally how to make it easier for everyone to see.
Yeah, good luck.
All right, I believe this question kind of gets at the challenge that we identified last summer that illustrated the need to move to temporary promotions. It says, I've seen NCOs that are not even eligible for their first staff sergeant evaluation board due to time and grade receive an SLC class date, whereas NCOs that just underwent their first look and awaiting OMLs potentially have no SLC class date in sight. This isn't how STEP is supposed to work. Why are we still seeing it?
All right, I'll jump on this one first. Part of this is part of the transition as we went from the old promotion board concept to the evaluation board concept. So what you saw when that did happen was, once everyone who was promotable under the old promotion board process had a school date and we still had school seats, we had to figure out, well, who do we send to school before the evaluation board's results were released. So there was no list set yet for the next group to go to school. So they began scheduling individuals based on their data rank at the time because they had the higher probability of possibly being selected. And so as they were being scheduled, then the new list came out, and then they shifted gears and began obviously scheduling those who were high on the OML. So that was part of that gap in the transition from the old process to the new process as a whole.
Yeah, I was going to talk about the exact same thing with the overlap, the 3-month overlap we talked about earlier. So yes, that's absolutely not how STEP is supposed to work, but that transition period will kind of cause that. So.
Okay, and I think kind of more directly, if we can discuss, well, you kind of gave an overview of what that challenge was in that gap. And so that led us to temporary promotions. Can we just very quickly give an overview of what those temporary promotions mean for the NCOs out in the field?
Yep, absolutely. So how we kind of, got to the temporary promotion process. So as we transitioned again from the old promotion board process, in 2019, when we did the promotion board, we selected enough individuals to carry us all the way until October of 21. But requirements, of course, changed over the time, and we ended up exhausting the fiscal year 19 promotion list as early as May of 21. And so we were ready to start promoting from the evaluation board OML, but unfortunately, we didn't have individual school trained yet based in the order of the OML. So in October, when we could no longer push this to the right any further, we went to the SMA with a decision on promoting individuals. Once we promoted a lot of master sergeants in October, we, at the guidance of the SMA, re-looked that process, and that's when we were able to present a viable core of temporary promotions to ensure that we weren't skipping the best talent for promotion, and then also making sure they had an opportunity to get school trained before they were actually skipped on the OML.
I think before, unless Sergeant Major McAdoo has anything before he talks, is, first of all, I'm almost certain since I've been the Sergeant Major of the Army, we've had temporary promotions. So this wasn't new. So all we had to do was just kind of modify what we've done. And I don't really see completely eliminating temporary promotions. I want to be clear on this. So there's some, for all the right reasons, we have temporary promotions. And we talked about this for years. It's like, what about those that if we went to full, large scale combat operations, we're going to promote people. And, so we've talked about this for a few years now. So that's always been in there. I want to be clear on that point. The second piece, I want to be up front. I said this at AUSA, I failed to manage. I made a mistake. We sent some folks to the school ahead of others that should not have gone. That's my fault. And that's why we implemented the temporary promotions. But that's also why we're looking at it each month, is to eliminate those numbers. So I would be, again, very clear. We've always had temporary promotions. I don't think we'll just completely eliminate this. We just want to get those down to as many exceptions to policies for temporary promotions as we can. Because ultimately, the goal is always to select a person, train them, educate them, and then promote them. What we don't want is a whole bunch of soldiers that are in a grade that we didn't train them or we didn't educate them to be in. So that just put that NCO and the leaders and the soldiers in a bad way. So our ultimate goal is always to get people trained and educated before we promote them. So, but I do want to be clear that temporary promotions won't completely be eliminated in the Army in the foreseeable future.
And as I appreciate that comment right there. Let's talk about the temporary promotions before, because you stated we're still going to have the temporary promotion before, whether it's employment, pregnancies, postpartum, or other things with that. But just kind of with the explanation earlier Sergeant Major Clark gave, remember at the beginning, the PME schedule before wasn't tied to the OML. We wanted to promote those that are those top performers within the OML. Before it was data rank. So the first time we went to promote based off of OML, those who had maybe went to school a long time ago because they've been in the Army for a while and had data rank a long time ago, they already had the PME, which disadvantaged those that we had identified, that the board had identified as talent right now going forward. So it was a good discussion, pretty good decision by the senior leadership to say we want to promote based off of merit, but due to this transition period, some people have went to MLC, or MLC probably the same time I did quite a few years ago, but they may not necessarily be at the top of the world now.
So when we're talking about these temporary promotions, how many soldiers has that actually impacted? Estimate.
We look at it every month, you think we'd have the number, but actually I don't have the number in front of me, so hopefully somebody does.
I don't have a number either, SMA, but I will tell you the effects on it and the impact that it has been a very positive one. And so I'll just give an example as to why we switched to the evaluation board from the promotion board. As many of you know, with the promotion board concept, we would project 2 years out for our E7 EA promotions and 3 years out for our sergeant majors. And of course, requirements would change over time that would make that projection off by the time we executed those promotions. So we were limited by law on how many master sergeants we could have. We could only have 2.5% of the enlisted population be master sergeants. We recently got the law changed to allow us to have 3% of master sergeants, which generated an additional 600 promotions. And so because we were able to, utilize the temporary promotions along with the evaluation board, instead of waiting 2 years to execute those additional 600 promotions, we were able to execute it in the year of execution. So it's allowed us to promote to requirements, which we've had a hard time doing over the years. And so this is putting more qualified non-commissioned officers in your ranks, putting squad leaders where they need to be, creating an inventory for HRC to identify drill sergeants and recruiters, and also to be able to generate the master sergeants that you need to serve in your first sergeant positions out there in your organizations.
Yeah, now for the numbers, normally I wouldn't have this, but since we get the chance to talk to the SMA every month on digging down into promotions, I would tell you, and I would just use master sergeants for an example because I'm looking at the numbers here. The first month that we did the temporary promotions, we had 248 temporary promotions out of about 450 promotions. Fast forward now to March, we're down to 74 that we're doing. So I just gave you that example to show you where we started at and how those numbers are going down pretty quickly.
Thank you so much for that update. And we talked about some of the other ways temporary promotions have been used before, operational assignments, pregnancy and postpartum. So knowing that the goal for these temporary promotions to clear the PME backlog is that it goes away because we're able to build that bench that we talked about. There was a question about exploring a permanent exception for extended training situations. And the example given was a soldier that returns to the Defense Language Institute to change their control language. The changing control language can be well over a year, and it's typically a PCS to DLI. And so while they're not being awarded a new MOS, they're in an ATARS course for 50 plus weeks. Are we looking at, or would it be possible to look at an expansion of those temporary promotions for a situation similar to that?
So that's a great question. So just for clarity, a permanent exemption would actually be a change in policy. It wouldn't necessarily be an exemption. But to the scenario that you gave, since it's such a very small population, one, we're going to apply common sense, obviously not to do any harm to a soldier's career in the event that they are unable to go to PME, not because of something they did, but because of obviously something the Army did. So understanding the question, this soldier is in a ATARS course for 50 plus weeks, which means they can't be enrolled into PME because they're already enrolled in another ATARS course. That would be as simple as request an exception through HRC promotion so that we could then amend their orders based on when their temporary promotion would expire to give them an opportunity to get school trained. The same thing would exist for a soldier who was temporarily promoted and then they received a no notice to deploy. That time frame that they had to get school trained, we would then amend that based on when they redeploy to allow them time to obviously get school trained. So there are some exceptions out there that would exist that are no fault of the soldier that may prevent them from getting school trained. Those can simply be requested through HRC to get an exemption for that. And if it's something that we haven't delegated to HRC for approval, it'll be elevated here to the G1. But again, we'll take a common sense approach on making sure that we aren't disadvantaging the soldier who's doing what the Army is asking them to do.
Yeah, it seems very topical right now for our current situation in Europe. So leaders listening, if you do have a soldier who is currently covered by a temporary promotion, make sure you're looking at what they've been asked to do by the Army and how we can make sure that we're not disadvantaging them by keeping their clock running to go to PME for that temporary promotion. Thank you very much for that. Talking about promotions, again, kind of looking at transparency and predictability. If HRC, I know we had talked about being able to look at that month by month on what the needs of the Army were going to be, but where are we in terms of being able to look out maybe across a quarter or a year and seeing what those requirements may be, and then being able to provide that information to people on when they would be promoted. So instead of kind of month by month, that waiting game, being able to kind of the way the officers do, knowing you'll be promoted in this quarter or later this year, and what are the pros and cons of something like that versus the way we have it now?
So go ahead. You want to go first? So in reference to the transparency, so for the year, we do have a projection of how many we believe that we will be able to promote. And in the system, in EDAS, your S1s and G1s also had the ability to present this to your sergeant majors as well. You would be counted as what we could consider high potential for promotion, kind of similar to the old promotable concept, but there's no guarantee that you would be promoted. And the reason why we do it on a month-to-month basis is because the requirements change every month. For example, we expect so many of this MOS to get out of the Army in the month of May, but half of them may have got extended because they're on an MEB, they re-enlisted, or whatever the case may be. So once we execute promotions on the first of the previous month, that's when we can have a true picture of what the requirements are for the next month. So because of those different human behaviors and decisions that soldiers get to make in reference to their careers, whether they separate earlier, whether they stay longer, that changes what the requirements are. So we manage that on a month-to-month basis. But what I can tell you, since we have started promoting on a month-to-month basis, we have been able to be closer to 100% of our requirements than we have been in the past, which is a huge lift for your formations because it now gives HRC the inventory to be able to PCS the right individuals to your organizations and fill your gaps that you were having in the past.
The reason I'm smiling on this again is because, again, we have an answer for this. And this is kind of goes along with I talked about earlier with how we promote, talking about transparency and putting information on our website earlier that showed how far the schedule PME. Also on our website, so that I as a general director, once again, we'll figure out a way for everyone to be able to easily navigate to it. We do post those projections by MOS for the quarter. Right now we have out through the second quarter, this fiscal year. Pretty soon the third quarter for this fiscal year is going to show, and it will show you by MOS what the projections are. And as we continue to state, though, those are projections based off what we think the requirements will be. So if there are requirements to be promoted, those that you see on those projections, all those MOSs right there, will be the ones that's getting promoted. So again, the transparency is there. We just got to get you to be able to get to be able to navigate to it easily.
All right. Thank you so much. So we have been getting a lot of questions coming in from the live feed on Facebook and Twitter. So I do want to just thank everyone who's watching. So these questions are going to be a little random and kind of bouncing around to different topics. But soldier,
I blame it on you. It's quite normal for you there, Sergeant Rainier.
I'll do my best to keep some sort of order to the chaos. Essentially, a soldier's asking about wanting to make sure that they are putting themselves in position for challenging and tough assignments. So if they feel like they're in an assignment now that is not challenging, or they, feel like that through no fault of their own, just the nature of their assignment, maybe putting them at a disadvantage for promotion. What advice would you give as far as reaching out to branch or talking to their leaders about tougher assignments?
I'll start with this and probably pass it over to HRC. Fundamentally, I would ask any leader that's watching is don't be selfish. So a lot of times when you have a great soldier, you just want to keep them right there and you don't want them to go anywhere. And, but the soldier, all they wanted to ever do is be a paratrooper or go to Ranger school or go to the cyber school. I acknowledge they're great soldiers, but think about the long-term health of the Army. We need great soldiers in all kinds of jobs and all MLSs. And if you want those tough assignments, my plea is to the leaders is be a leader and send those soldiers to the school and those assignments that they think that they believe are challenging. Because normally what I find is it's at some kind of leader that says, no, you can go right after this, whatever this is, NTC, or we're busy right now, and I've never had that philosophy. I completely disagree. And I'll give my own personal example. I had a staff sergeant that worked for me. I had one NCO, and that's all I had. And he said, well, I want to be a recruiter. I said, okay, well, you'll go to school like when? Now. And he's like, but, we're busy, and what are we going to do? I said, we'll figure it out. Yeah, there's a lot of people in the Army. We'll figure it out. So, next week he goes to school, and I'm hoping he had a successful recruiting job in California. So if he's watching, so hopefully he did a great job. But I would just encourage you as a leader, when you have these soldiers that ask for those jobs, we can do this. But leadership really matters to help with this. Now, for the assignments to get into your branch manager, I'd ask Sergeant Major McAdoo to chime in.
Yeah, and I will lead off with everyone on the line, every soldier. I understand that the Human Resource Command exists for one purpose, and that is to be the customer service for you also. Absolutely. It doesn't matter what your rank is. Always continuously reach out to your branch, whether you're in an enlisted manning cycle or not. Now, for those of you who want to take, I guess a more vested interest or try to volunteer for stuff, understand that the enlisted for the E6 and above, obviously, you're tied to a YMAB, a year month available to move. Now, that YMAB is pushed out three years from whenever you get somewhere. And that is the model that we use. You don't have to wait to go into enlisted manning cycle. You can contact your branch manager any day, every day, whether it's on Teams, whether it's on, on email, whether it's coming to HRC, whatever it is, to maybe identify maybe some of those things that maybe you didn't think about or that are out there for you. But absolutely, you should continue to contact your branch, anyone in your branch, on every day, any day, to find those challenging assignments. And you have to wait until it's time, for your YMAP to come up.
And if I can just add one thing also, not from a policy perspective, but from a leadership perspective as well. A lot of soldiers get hung up sometime on the type of job that they have. And I will tell you, the best job that you can have is the one that you're currently in, because that's the one that you can affect. Don't worry about the title that you have, because many of you are limiting yourself to what your duty description says. If you are not challenged in the job that you have, there are other things that you can do to help keep you competitive with your peers, i.e., best warrior competitions, best squad competitions, Sergeant Morales, Sergeant Artie Murphy, NCO of the Year, things of those different natures to help develop you and your team as a whole, that are considered by board members when they are looking through your records at the great things that you are doing as a whole.
And Sergeant Major Clark, that's a great comment. And everything I do, I guess you've been in the Army, so long, you have like stories for everything. So it's really important what you said about don't worry about the title that you have, do the job that you've been given and do it well. I had a first sergeant. He was a first class, and he was in a first sergeant position. I clearly made the mistake as a young staff sergeant in that organization of calling him sergeant. Of course, he yelled at me. He said, "I'm the first sergeant." Yeah, he's wearing sergeant first class. So how was I supposed to know? But he still yelled at me. And I said, okay. But later on, I was at the headquarters and I just, casually heard the commander talking about, I'll take the first E8 that comes in the door, to replace him as a first sergeant. So the moral of that story is, don't worry about that you're in that job. You got the title of being the first sergeant, but maybe you're not doing well at it. So you may be in a sergeant major position, but if you're not doing well, it's probably going to reflect poorly on your job. So I agree, don't get wrapped up in titles. You've been given a job, step one, execute that job to the best of your abilities. So I think that's a valuable point. I really appreciate that comment.
And that's a great segue to our next question about talent management. And as we look at first sergeants specifically, the number of sergeants, first classes in those first sergeant positions, and kind of what are we doing to make sure that we get qualified master sergeants in those positions so that we don't see the ripple effect of a platoon sergeant who's now the first sergeant and a staff sergeant who's now the platoon sergeant, and then seeing what can happen as we go down the chain like that.
Yeah, we got a lot of work to do on this. And I think the OML actually was designed to help with this. So when you listen to Sergeant Major Clark, he already talked about the law, and we went from 2.5 to 3%. But there's on master sergeants by law we can have in the Army. There's another law that applies to this also is the 1%. Only 1% of the Army can be E9s. That's it. That's by law. And why do I say this? Going all the way down to E8s. Well, if there's an E8 filling in for sergeant major, and then that takes away from that first sergeant job too. Then you have a sergeant first class. So it's all the way to the top. And again, I plead with leaders, if you have a sergeant major not in an authorized sergeant major position, that causes us to have maybe an E8 in an E9 position and then a sergeant first class. So it goes all the way down. So how we manage our people matters. And if you're overstrength on an installation and on E8s, and you're an overstrength on E9s, and those E8s aren't filling those valid positions as an E8 and those valid positions are an E9, as a leader, you need to do something about it. And from an HRC perspective or G1, that's why we created the OML. If you're not performing well and you're not in those jobs that we've asked you to do, then we need to be honest on the NCOER and tell the board when every year they're going to be re-looked at. It says this person isn't performing to standard. And if they don't make the cut line, they'll be separated, because that truly does cause us to have a high number of sergeant first classes in those first sergeant positions. And we want to put them in those positions, but we also want to promote them and pay them for that. And the only way we do that is make sure that we're not over the law on E8s and we're not over the law on E9s, because that counts against us. And if there's anything that I missed, Sergeant Major Clark, please let me know.
No, SMA, you're spot on. I just want to add something, and I know this is probably going to be mind-blowing for a lot of the listeners, but we are actually at 100.1% effective March of this year for master sergeants. Now, the issue would be kind of most of them were in the same place when they were all getting promoted. So now we have to obviously start PCS and individuals around to spread the wealth to ensure that we have master sergeants in the right place. But the other part that they don't see is, again, part of the transition from the old select, train, educate, promote for sergeant major is the 500 plus master sergeants that we thought we were short in the operating strength. They're all frocked as sergeant majors right now, which still counts against our E8 population until they're actually promoted to sergeant major. So that is something to take into account. So when class 72 graduates and we have master sergeants returning back to the master sergeant population, that will help with the distribution issues of making sure we have master sergeants spread out in the places that we actually need them.
Okay, and since you mentioned master sergeants coming out of the Sergeant Majors Academy, I'm sure there's hundreds listening to us right now, maybe fivers, tens of tens. Our people are listening is those master sergeants that come out and graduate from the Sergeant Majors Academy. It kind of goes back to what we said before. Do the job you've been given. If you graduate from the Sergeant Major's Academy and you go back and you're on an installation and you're in a first sergeant job, you should absolutely be the best first sergeant ever known to man, because you've done that job normally, or you're a very senior master sergeant. What I encourage you to do is don't shy away from the hard jobs, or don't even expect that I have to be put in a sergeant major position. That's not what the Army may have asked you to do on your next assignment. And where I see people failed, and when they came out of the academy, they weren't looking for those hard jobs, and they expected that they would get promoted, and some of them were passed over. And I can say that because I went to the Sergeant Major's Academy under the old system. So I'm so old. We went back; it was new, and then now we're back to old again. Is that some master sergeants graduated in my class when I went to Sergeant Major's Academy that weren't promoted automatically, and that's where I saw failure, is that they didn't seek out those tough jobs. And then if they did, they may not do well. They didn't perform well, and then they didn't get promoted. So a plea to those that are coming out of the academy as a master sergeant, not going to a sergeant major position, I encourage you to perform well in those jobs.
If I could use as a plug and kind of dovetail off the comment that you made earlier, SMA, reference how it continues to affect the rank structure all the way down. And I won't give a specific number right now, but as we continue to look at numbers here with an HRC, we're having a issue with the E4s and E5s that are eligible to go to the promotion board. They're not going, and that they have not been to the promotion board. I just bring that up because obviously someone on the line is asking me a question about some first class and master sergeants. We've got the senior NCOs on the line here who kind of set the tone in whatever organization that you're in when it comes to leader development. So I would ask that we continue to push for, make sure the soldiers are going to the board, because as the SMA said, it goes all the way down. The same thing, it goes all the way up. So we have E5s that are fully eligible for every other reason. I mean, they've got everything done, they're not flagged or whatever, and we are not sending them to the board, and we're not flagging them. We're not doing barring whatever. That is hurting the ranks as we continue to go up. So the numbers are pretty astronomical right now, but I won't give that number to you yet, SMA, as we continue to work with it.
Okay. That's something else for me to work on. So yes, you're correct. It goes both ways. It goes all the way down and comes all the way back up. Thank you.
All right, our next question is about broadening opportunities and more opportunities for enlisted. We see a lot of advanced civil schooling for officers and a lot of diversity in their broadening assignments. Enlisted, it seems that the perception is it's recruiting, drill sergeant, SFAB, and of the three, recruiting hurts your career. Can we kind of talk about some of those opportunities and dispel some of those myths and rumors of them?
Okay. Okay, recruiting does not hurt your career. So I think when I look across the panel, which is the senior sergeants major in the Army, I'm almost certain probably about 50% are probably recruiters. The other 50% are drill sergeants. So I'm pretty sure that recruiting, being a recruiter, does not hurt your career. So it should be career enhancing and broadening, not enabling. So that's number one. There's a lot of opportunities for broadening, and I'll open up to the group to see if they had any comments. But the big ones are, we have to fill our drill sergeant requirements. We can't, man the Army if we don't have drill sergeants to bring new recruits in to train them. So that's what we call up here one of those must-do things. Same thing recruiting. If we can't recruit people into the Army, then the drill sergeants won't have anybody to train. So then we won't have an Army. So those are the broadening assignments those are like must-dos in the Army on broadening. And that's where a lot of our staff sergeants go. Those are probably, and I'll let HRC correct me, but those are where the top two broadening assignments are. But there's other broadening assignments. But that's the hard part for HRC and everybody, is how do we meet the requirements that we have for the Army and all these other jobs. And we'd love to send more people out to joint jobs, but if you meet the skill sets and the requirements to be a drill sergeant, if you meet the skill sets and the requirements for a recruiter, and I always like it whenever you have to go to those jobs, and everybody keeps saying, well, I want the top 10%, and then I want top 10% to be recruiters, then I want the top 10 to be drill sergeants, then I want the top 10 to go to SFAB, then I want the top 10 to be SF selection. And so you can keep seeing that, I don't know, I think we're down to like 40 or 50% at some point, but there are a lot of broadening assignments. I will say my goal is before you move to a broadening assignment, you be grounded in your skill set first. I've said this a couple of times, I'll say it again. I want 2 years, time and grade, time and service, especially if you're a staff sergeant, before you go off to a broadening job. You got to know your job before you can go get broadened. So don't get in this rush to go get a broadening assignment, especially if you've not been grounded in the fundamentals of your job. I'll turn it over to Sergeant Major McAdoo if you got any other comments.
Actually, once again, appreciate it.
Yeah, if I said time in position, time in grade and time in position as a staff sergeant before you move up. Good.
I appreciate the comment reference. Everyone wanting the top 10% for everything. Like you said, it's not just drill sergeant and it's not just recruiters. It's all over the place. And as we continue to identify those personnel, that you go through all of those, you've seen the bucket list where you go down where qualifying or not qualifying personnel, that number gets smaller. So, and as some major Clark said earlier, whatever job it is, whatever broadening assignment is that you got out there, do it to the best of your ability.
So a couple of things to add. One, there are several enlisted broadening assignments that aren't being utilized well. For instance, the training with industry, HRC sends out a lot of messages and does not get the inventory of requests to take part in those programs as they should. And so, of course, it's like leave. If you don't use it, you'll end up losing it. So I ask that you definitely talk with your branch manager to kind of see what some of those options are, because there's quite a few out there that exist that haven't been filled. And then to the second part in reference to the recruiting and SMA, I just would like to take this as an opportunity to just kind of plug and explain to everyone why we went to the 48 months time and grade for the staff sergeants. It was so that you can have the opportunity to do your what we used to refer to as a key development assignment, and then be able to go do broadening, so that there was no perception, if you will, that you were hindering your career by being able to do both. But there's also a misconception that you're taking longer to get promoted to Sergeant First Class. In actuality, we're actually promoting you faster. If you look at the old process, 36 months time and grade before you got looked at, then we built in 12 months for you to get school trained. So although you got your promotable status at 36 months, we still didn't intend to promote you for 18 to 24 months later. So the average person was staying staff sergeant for just under 5 years before they were actually getting promoted. So 48 months, your time actually isn't extended. You just don't have a promotable status at either 24 or 36 months. That's the difference.
Yeah, thanks.
Great. And I do want to thank both of you, gentlemen, for the conversation today. I want to thank everyone listening for asking questions, the soldiers over on Reddit for the great questions over the weekend. And honestly, there are just too many to get after. But as we go into closing comments, SMA, something that we have seen a lot during the live stream today in the comments section and over the weekend was any update that we can provide on ACFT. A lot of anxiety in the force. We've said 1 April time and time again. Is there anything at all that we can say or that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, ACFT is coming, so keep training. So I think, we're going to get it. I'm hopeful that we'll get an announcement in the next 2 weeks. It's coming, so keep training and be physically fit. I think if you keep training for the ACFT version that you have now, I think you're going to be perfectly fine. For anybody that was out there and heard this one comment yesterday on, well, the ACFT isn't around yet, so we're just going to start running again. You're going to be sadly mistaken. So the ACFT is coming. So there may be a minor tweak here or there, but I'm confident the version of the ACT will be similar to what we're doing right now. So keep training. Don't throw away the baby with the bathwater. I promise. So it's coming. It's coming soon. So I appreciate the comments, and be patient, and don't worry about the date. 1 April is still going to come, whether you want to or not. And be confident that we'll get you a word out soon.
All right, gentlemen, before we close out, I'll go to Sergeant Major McAdoo. Any final thoughts or anything you want to leave the audience with?
Yeah, just for everyone online, obviously today we're talking about a bunch of initiatives and stuff, and mainly we focused on the evaluation board. As kind of stated earlier, initiatives and stuff, they're all put in place to better take care of you. But if you don't know about them, it does absolutely nothing for you. So everything we're doing with transparency stuff, as far as for putting stuff online or stuff that doesn't make sense to you, we'll continue to do that. And I kind of, since this is kind of tax season right now, I kind of liken it to you filing taxes. There are all kind of tax codes and tax laws out there that are already in place right now. But if you're filing your taxes and you don't know all those rules, you're not going to be able to maximize that return that you get. So the intent today, as we're talking to you today, whether you agree with the policy or not, we're going to make sure that you understand what it is, just like you understand the tax rules and tax codes, so you can maximize your return on investment or your return check from taxes. The same way you can maximize all of the initiatives and things that the Army is putting out to take care of you. So hopefully today you got a better understanding. Maybe some things have been clarified as far as the valuation board, so you can better get a huge return on your taxes.
Thank you so much. Sergeant Major Clark.
Hey, again, SMA Sergeant Major McAdoo, again, appreciate the opportunity to be able to help educate the field. One of the best parts of my job is trying to help with the strategic communication of all the different things that we're working on here in the building to help soldiers out there in the field. I know that it's a lot of changes, but I will tell you these changes will benefit our Army, your soldiers, and the families in the long run. And I just ask that you continue. I know you have a 25-meter target in front of you that you're focused on, but I ask that you continue to stay abreast on the different changes as they are happening, because there is risk associated when you know enough about something to think that you're right, but you don't know enough about it to know that you're wrong. And so reach out to your leaders to make sure that you have all the information so that you're making a decision with the most current policies or processes that we have in place.
Sergeant Major McAdoo and Sergeant Major Clark, thank you. And I really liked your comment, is because I find that it be a common trend, is that we don't really do the research like we used to, and we don't know the complete facts of what the Army has already done, the Army regulation, or where is this at. And a lot of times I find myself, a lot of town halls going, hey, we solved that already, or that's already in the regulation. So your comments are very valuable. Thank you to both the Sergeant Major McAdoo, Sergeant Major Clark, and thanks to Sergeant Rainier and the entire team for actually putting this together. And a special thanks to the soldiers in your questions, whether it doesn't matter, Instagram, Reddit, subreddit, whatever, Twitter, TikTok, sometimes we get it from all places. So your comments are appreciated. And this is just, keep them coming. This is our example of how we can just kind of get you the answers to some of the questions that you ask. And if there's something that you need to hear about from your leaders or from the Sergeant Major of the Army, we'll get a group together and kind of tell you what we think. You may not always like the answer that you get, but we'll do our best to do what's best for our soldiers. So in closing, I really want to talk really quickly is one closing comment about temporary promotions. A lot of talk about it. And I heard it, I heard a little bit about, hey, temporary promotions aren't going to go away, and talked about postpartum. I want to be very clear. That's one reason for a temporary promotion, but there's another reason for temporary promotions, and I'm going to be very clear on this, is that if we were go to combat full scale, we're going to promote people, and that's why temporary promotions are not going to go away. There are other reasons, but I want to be clear. The number one for me is for soldiers in combat. If they stay there or get extended, and they're there for an extended period of time, and we need them there for all the right reasons, we're going to promote the most talented. And I've been adamant about that for a long time, and I want that to get lost in the narrative. Is that that was my number one reason for temporary promotions when I pushed for this for years back. But there's other ways to do this too. So it goes back to what Sergeant Major Clark was saying. We always had constructive credit too. So that's still a process that's alive and well. You just have to know what the Army has and how we utilize those regulations that we have and the policies that we have. So there's other ways to get promotions outside of temporary promotions, and constructive credit is one of those. And then closing is why I emphasize that, and I'll close with what I start with, and that's why I emphasize the temporary promotion for those in combat, or those that are forward deployed being asked to do what we've asked them to do. We got to continuously look out for those that are forward deployed, no matter where you're at, and make sure that we do keep the best talent in, and we will always want to keep them in our thoughts and everything that we do as an Army regulation, because that's what we exist to do. We exist to fight and win the nation's wars, and our goal here in the Department of the Pentagon is make sure that we have the soldiers that are ready and the most talented in those jobs for anything the nation's asked them to do. So thank you all for listening, and thank you for your time.